Hello, I'm Tyler,
I'm Justin.
and this is Newbies to Movies, episode 2. And this week we are talking about an actor whose name is Josh Brolin, and we picked two movies with him. The first one being Milk.
And No Country for Old Men.
Yep. So Justin hasn't seen No Country for Old Men before this week, and I hadn't seen Milk before this week, so we chose it for each other to watch and then rate and review. Really, just overall concept of this podcast is picking new movies for us to watch so we can expand our film reviewing aspects and just how many movies we can watch. So
Yep.
first, we're going to talk about Josh Brolin as a little bit. So he is a nepo baby in the way that his dad was. James Brolin was an actor, so he grew up in Hollywood throughout seeing different scenes of acting. And watching some interviews with Josh Brolin is that he wasn't really big into acting until he got into theater when he was in high school. And once he was in high school, he decided to do improv class just to do it in theater. And then the moment that he became a character, he was like, "Oh, I really like this feeling. This is really interesting to me." And then from there, he got his first role in Goonies, which was all the way back in the '80s, as like a kid actor. And then he had a really long stint of doing not so good movies slash not a lot many. He didn't get a lot of jobs, roles. He had kind of like a downside of his personal life too. And then back in like the 2000s is really where he started picking up again to where he's kind of a normal actor now.
I never even recognized that was him in the Goonies until we really started digging into him this week. And then
Yeah,
it started to make a lot more sense. And then I started asking the question, was like, where was he in the 90s? It's
yeah,
just gone.
yeah. Yeah, he just didn't really exist. And then nowadays, he's really reason why we also did him this week was because the new movie Weapons that came out last Friday. He is one of the main actors in it. I've seen the movie. Justin has not, but it's a very
I'll
interesting movie.
definitely
One
check
of
it
the
out. Yeah.
very elevated horror kind of movie. Highly recommend it to anybody that likes horror, but as well as Josh Brolin is hilarious in it. So first, we're going to start off with Milk. Um, so Milk, Josh Brolin's like a very side character in this. This is actually his only Oscar nomination, though, which I thought was also interesting, uh,
Yeah.
based off some other movies he's been in. But it's about Harvey Milk, really the life of him once he becomes political. So once he becomes on the board of supervisors in San Francisco, because he was the first gay member to be a part of any government um, office. So it's really interesting to see that point of view, but it's also just when he starts to be political in that part of his life until his sadly and untimely death from Josh Brolin's character in the movie, a real life person being Dan White. So starting off with the plot, I gave it a 5 out of 10 personally because I didn't see anything crazy good or crazy bad about it. Um, Now, I understand why they chose just the political parts of the movie for him to be a part of.
Hmm.
However, if you're going to tell a story about an individual like Harvey Milk or like any political official, I think because it starts when he's like 44, so it starts really late in
Yeah.
life, and he's got
I
so
read
much more
something.
before.
It was like 8 years before his passing was like when it kicked off.
Hmm. Which is, I think they could have started it, or at least given glimpses in his past life because he served in the military. Um,
Hmm.
while being in the closet. And then from that point, it's like such a strong point where throughout the movie they bring up how he was very closeted all growing up. And that led to like a lot of his past relationships of them having to hide their relationship of why they broke up slash why a lot of them tried their lives was because
Hmm.
he was always like mandating being in the closet, which is really interesting of him as a character, but would have been more interesting to see glimpses in the past of like how that impacted and how that made him who he is.
Yeah.
So I think they really missed on that key point. Something else about the plot was really throughout the movie, Harvey Milk himself, who's played by Sean Penn, who ended up winning Oscar that year for his role, was how a big thing about Harvey Milk was he really wanted people to come out of the closet early throughout their life, really because he saw how it ruined his like middle his life. Another point where I think they really just missed on the plot of like bringing back the point of why.
Yeah, adding that dynamic would add a lot to the movie.
Mhm. Now characters, since they are real life people, it's really hard to like give it a bad score. But I gave it
Yeah,
like a 7 out of 10. I don't think they did anything crazy great with it, but I don't think it was like middle of the pack. I think Sean Penn really played a surprising character, like how well he played Harvey Milk himself, because Sean Penn usually plays not those type of characters. And then as well as I'll get into like the acting of Josh Brolin himself into it, and why I believe it is his only Oscar nomination. Cinematography, nothing too crazy. It's just middle of the pack. It's a biopic, so can't get
yeah, San Francisco.
yeah. Now the dialogue I think was a 7.5 out of 10 because I think they did have some really tough conversations between each other. So James Franco's character in it is also Harvey Milk's boyfriend right when he moves to San Francisco, but then they break up because James Franco's character really just kind of doesn't like how political and like how much into it like Milk was. Um, really just
The
saw it
drain
taking
on
over.
their relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically. Um, I think those really tough conversations to have in a movie is really important as well. Um, just to show like it isn't just all like bells and whistles. Now the movie set design, I gave that a really high score, 9.5 out of 10, mainly because where it was set was actually where on like the fifth district, in the corner of where their actual video store was located. Everything they
Okay.
recorded was in actual locations, which I thought was really interesting because not a lot of movies do that. So,
Yeah. No, that's important too for the overall feel of the movie, especially in this sense. You're shooting a biopic, you want it to be as accurate as possible.
mhm. So it was really interesting to see how he ran his election straight out of his video store, and seeing the actual
Hmm.
video store on the street itself was I think added to the overall movie. Now the acting, I gave it 8 out of 10, mainly because I think Sean Penn and Josh Brolin's character kill it. While I think the rest of them um, are just middle of the pack, some less
Yeah.
good as the others. What I think was really interesting about Josh Brolin's character specifically was how he played him. Where Dan White, it's like if you read up on it, which I did a little bit after the movie more so, was that a lot of people believed that he wasn't very homophobic in the sense, um, but he was rather, it was his ego that was hit. So he saw somebody come in. They didn't. They originally were very nice to each other. Dan White was very appreciative to him, but then Harvey Milk went back on a deal that they had, like a political deal of a vote together. And from that point, Dan White didn't trust him. And then he saw Harvey Milk just kept growing more and more popular throughout. Um, and from that became like a resentment towards Harvey Milk. And that's where Dan White kind of just kept getting his ego hurt. He was having family issues. And then I think you could just see how every single scene with Josh Brolin, how you could see like within the acting, his ego is getting more hurt and how his life is falling apart without actually seeing any background of it. But you can just see
Hmm.
it within like his character itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, from every Brolin movie I've seen, he's done a good job of displaying that, right? Anything going wrong with the character, rather than speaking it, he can display what's going on in his head well
Yeah.
with his acting.
No, and there's one scene where he plays where it's Harvey Milk's birthday and they're having a birthday party, and then Dan White. I looked it up. This actually did stop happen. Dan White showed up, um, and he was like really drunk, like hammered. Showed up
Yeah.
hammered and was just like, "Oh, I want to join the party," all this stuff, and then Milk has to like kind of kick him out, and then this leads to like a couple months later, Dan White quits, but then wants his job back right after quitting, and then the mayor denies it, and then that's what leads to like the end of the movie of him shooting the mayor, and then as well as Harvey Milk to end it all. Really, just because I feel like the motive was that he felt like his ego was hurt, and he didn't like losing. Um, he felt like he was lost. Um,
Yeah,
Now, the directing and soundtrack, again, it's a biopic. Nothing crazy about it, but nothing really bad about it. So I gave both of them a 4 out of 10. I think how some other directors could have gone away with it to again hit those flashback scenes where I think the director really just missed out on a possible thing. Now, theme, I think a 7 out of 10, mainly because it's really based off of a documentary that was uh, I think, released within 10 years of Harvey Milk's actual death. And then they
I
waited like,
did read about that. Yeah.
and they based it all off that documentary. And then using that documentary, then created this movie. So I think that's really important too, because that documentary did win like the Oscar, like ran the Oscars that year for anything that it could win.
Hmm.
And then lastly, editing, I think 5 out of 10. There was nothing for overall. I think this movie was very like middle of the pack for me. I don't think anything was crazy. I think the subject itself was very like intriguing because I am not very experienced in watching these type of biopics. But I think it really told like an interesting story. So my overall score was a 62.
Okay.
Yeah. Something else to bring a note was like Dan White ended up like not being because it the court case that followed was that he was found guilty, but they couldn't because they thought he was crazy because he was eating too much junk food. That was like
Really?
why. Yeah. That's why he didn't end up serving more than 10 years because
That's
they
crazy.
yeah, which just shows back to like the time of when it was and everyone's
Yeah.
approach. Obviously nowadays that would not be the case. Um, there's also like a big like sentiment or like big resentment of the LGBTQ community within San Francisco, but I'm sure most people know now like San Francisco is like very LGBTQ friendly, and I feel like Harvey Milk was like the standing character that really started that.
Yeah. And no, like what you were saying about the kind of directing, soundtrack editing, it's kind of tough with a biopic because not everybody's always going to be happy with that story, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different points of view that you have to grab from to make that story well-rounded and shaped. And so I know we've seen a lot of biopics lately in the past 5 years or so. But the one common struggle with all of them is trying to encompass that whole story from everybody's point of view. You'll never make everybody happy with it.
Yeah, I agree. Um, like what I was comparing it to with scores was what I thought was like a perfect way of doing it, and then what I thought what people really messed up. Um,
Yeah.
like uh, Straight Outta Compton, I think they do a really good job of like storytelling just for that smaller
Hmm.
story, or like just for that like group. Um, and even the Bob Dylan new one with Timothy Chalamet, I think they did a really good job. And then
Yeah.
some that just aren't so good. Can't think of one right at the top of my head, but
I know people had problems with Bohemian Rhapsody because it didn't accurately portray the story of Freddie Mercury. People felt that way. I'm not saying they did, but there was a lot of backlash around, kind of Disneyfying stuff
mhm,
and sticking stuff in where it doesn't belong and everything. But it doesn't sound like they did that much with Milk, so that's good.
nah. Which was probably good, probably for the better.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, overall milk, I think 62, just middle of the pack for me. I would give it like a B grade if I had to, like a B minus grade.
Hmm.
Cool.
Yep. So I'm gonna jump into No Country for Old Men now. I enjoyed this movie. I really liked the small scale plot. It didn't feel like it was like this big grand story. It was a few characters. And with the plot, I gave it a 7. I think the pacing was really good. The story never felt rushed, but I also didn't feel like I was just sitting around waiting for something to happen. The third act is what bothered me. We see Josh Brolin's character Moss pass away, and it felt like that wasn't wrapped up at all. It really switched over to the sheriff, which I understand that in the book he was the main character, which is fine. if you want to tell me that story, let me see the sheriff from the get-go. I
Yeah,
felt like I had three quotable lines from the sheriff in the beginning and then didn't really hear from him like half the movie. And then at the end, I'm supposed to care about him.
yeah,
That was my one knock on this movie. But other than that, um, Javier Bardem was perfect in this movie. I think he won a bunch of awards for this. Sorry, for the plot, I gave it a 7. I think I said that already.
yeah.
But characters, I also gave a 7. Like I said, there's just a few really good characters, and then everybody else just kind of felt like a side character. Um, Javier Bardem, his character had a lot of good themes involved with fate and chance. I thought that was made his character really eerie. You never knew what was going to happen with anybody or anything he interacted with because of his whole idea of fate and chance.
Hmm.
Um, I'm gonna butcher this. It's Llewellyn Moss. That's Josh Brolin's character. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna call him Moss 'cause I'm not gonna try to say that. Uh, you see his struggle for morality with good and evil. He obviously wants all the money, but he's definitely way in over his head. And they kind of hint to that a few times throughout there. Sheriff Bell was pretty good towards the end. Obviously, his whole theme was centered around old versus new school thinking,
Hmm.
especially when he's talking to other lawmen, other police officers from different counties, and that kind of stuff. He's kind of just reiterating that he doesn't think he's fit out for this new school ways like he was when he first started as a police officer. The cinematography, I gave it a 9. I thought there was pretty perfect. I think that's what this movie is highly regarded for.
Yeah.
A lot of wide lens shots, minimal camera movement. There's a lot of, I really like the audio design in this movie. You know, in like the motel scene, there's people walking, you're hearing beeps of doors, you're hearing creaks, you're hearing all this stuff, and you can tell that that's really messing with the characters.
And then like the
Also, the
shooting
scene,
too, the shooting
yeah, yeah,
scene
yeah.
between them two are it's insane camera work.
Yeah, it is.
One of the highlights for
The
me.
camera tracking's really good for the characters. You know where everybody is at all points, even though they start kind of questioning where the other person is.
Yeah.
The other scene that stood out to me was when Javier Bardem's character, he puts the towel in the gas tank to blow up the car.
He's
It
walking.
reminded me a lot of the Joker in The Dark Knight,
Hmm.
just kind of walking out of the hospital with the explosion behind him.
Hmm.
They're both, egomaniacs who are only worried about their world and not the world going on around them.
Hmm.
That was really well done, and I think that's what a lot of people, recognize this movie for is the cinematography. I
Yeah.
think dialogue I gave an 8. Like I said, I felt like Sheriff Bell was really quotable. I like the quote, "This country's hard on people. You can't stop what's coming. Ain't y'all waiting on you." That's vanity. I think him as a character could have been dove into more. That would be, again, my one knock on this, especially if you want to do the story from the book. It would be, less on following Moss's character, but obviously we're here to talk about Josh Brolin, so
Yeah.
that's okay. Um, the set design was great. I mean, displaying the desert and the surrounding towns, very rundown buildings, which was a perfect way of displaying the absence of wealth in that area.
Yeah.
For Moss's character, he really wanted the money. Um, and obviously Javier Bardem's character, kind of an outsider. He knew his way around, but it was displaying that he was also an outsider in the sense of he didn't care about the money.
Hmm.
It was more about his ego and what he wanted. Um, with that, he was definitely by far the best. I gave acting a 9.
Yeah.
Um, I thought his role specifically stood out the most. He was very daunting as a character, but also very calculated.
Hmm.
Um, you almost knew what was going to happen when before he got there, which
Yeah.
was very eerie to me. And I think Brolin's character had no idea what he was getting into. He started to figure out towards the end, I believe, that he was in way over his head. Um, but I think he felt careless on purpose. He felt like he had nothing else better going on to then join that fight.
Hmm. No, yeah.
What did
I think acting wise, it was great by all the big three in it. Um,
Hmm.
Obviously, Javier was great, but I think Moss's character really brings a certain grit to it. Because something of him as a character was that he was a Vietnam War veteran, so like it's not like he was like no somebody that can't survive. But
Yeah,
he's definitely got the training for that. But like, there's a difference between being able to survive and going against an actual like psycho person, like a psychotic
yeah.
person. And that's basically
And
who.
I think that's Yeah, I think that's what Woody Harrelson's character was trying to warn him of, and they did a good job at that. Like he's like, "Hey, I'm a vet too, but this guy's different. You're
Yeah.
not gonna make it here."
And then
He
within
already knows where
20
you're at.
minutes, Woody Harrelson's character dies because
Yeah.
it's kind of
He
like
was in it for
just a foreshadow, but then also like showing that he didn't even listen to his own advice.
yeah, yeah. He still thought he was bigger and badder. For directing, I gave it a 7. I said, it's a great movie. But like I said, again, going back to the sheriff, I just had character arc issues with that. Kind of how the third act became. Just felt like there was no closure with Moss's character, which is fine. I understand that's supposed to be the abruptness of it, right? It's
Hmm.
like, boom, he's dead. You kind of knew he was in way over his head, but uh, here it is. And then the soundtrack, I gave it a 5. I know that they purposely used very sparse music for suspense. When I was reading about it, they wanted to do more camera work and, audio cues, like I was telling you about in the motel scene,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff with it, which definitely made it feel more eerie, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to rank it high because they just purposely didn't do it on purpose. Like,
Yeah,
really just don't have a big soundtrack because they wanted to
yeah,
add that more like rustic, and you're just like listening to like the
yeah,
random like streets and random like desert, no, like nothing.
yeah. And I think there's something to that. It makes you feel like you're more involved in it. Um, if you were there, you wouldn't be hearing music in the background.
Yeah.
You'd be hearing the wind in the desert and that kind of stuff.
Um.
Um, Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say with Tommy Lee Jones' character, like Sheriff Bell, something about him, like I get like he's pretty much disappearing in like the middle of the movie, but I think that actually
Hmm.
adds to why there's no country for old men because he was like doing it more old school way. Oh, like oh, it's gonna come to me. Oh, like I'll
Hmm.
like, but instead of chasing it, um, and it kind of just showed like how lazy he was at his age of doing his job, of how he wasn't
Yeah.
actually on top of stuff, um, how he really was missing stuff, and then but he still made that promise to his wife, like oh, like I'll make sure. And then by the time
Hmm.
at the end of the movie, he realizes like, oh, wait, he returns to the same scene, and then he goes back to it, and he's too late because he took the whole movie to actually figure out like who the guy was instead of like being on the forefront and like actually getting more involved. It seemed like a very esque of like him as a character itself was just lazy, like being lazy with his
Yeah.
old age, and like that's why he was missing for the whole middle of the movie. And at the end, he kind of like recognizes like, yeah, I need to get out of this game. Like I'm not made for it anymore.
Yeah.
And he's
No, I understood that when I started, thinking about it more. It just kind of left me bad taste in my mouth, kind of leaving Moss's character pretty much out of it. Nobody talked about it after he died. Even his wife at the end. I mean, they mentioned it, but it was never much closure there, which is fine. I get what they were going with, and they wanted to make the ending about Sheriff Bell. But with the themes I talked about the old and new ways for the sheriff, and also like the decline of morality. Sheriff Bell sees that the game's changing and he's not fit for it anymore.
yeah,
These guys are ruthless, and it didn't always used to be that way. Like he was talking about with the the other town's cop. I forgot the name of the town, but they were just kind of talking about how it's not what it used to be anymore, and they don't know how to react to any of these situations.
yeah. No, based when it was like based around the 70s, right after um, Vietnam War is up, so like a
Yeah.
different perspective. A lot of psychopaths at that point, um, and that's really like looking back in like time frame. That's when a lot of serial killers were going up too, like real like in the
Hmm.
real world. So seeing how like psycho people like just were increasing for some reason at that time compared to before. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I gave the editing a 9. Like I said, they used a lot of cinematography, like camera work, audio cues to build up the tension. I thought that was done pretty perfectly, and that leads my overall score to being a 7.8. I really enjoyed the movie. Like I said, I have a little bit of issue with it at the end. I think I've read about a few other people that also have that issue compared to the book. I haven't read the book, um, but from what I've heard, it's more centered around Sheriff Bell, and I'd like to see a little bit more of him in the middle of the movie. I think that would add to the ending, but again, great movie overall.
yeah. Now I definitely see what you're saying with him missing in the middle of the movie. For me, this was like probably like an A movie for me.
Hmm.
I think the Coen brothers themselves as directors are really interesting in the way they direct. You look at Fargo and then True Grit are two good examples to bring up. Is that they just really know how to tell a story like crazy, and it's
Yeah.
such an interesting way to like tell a story, and like just feels very real.
Hmm.
Doesn't feel made up at all, even though it is a made up story.
Yeah.
Something else about
There.
Llewellyn Moss's like ending was it seemed like the moment, like the first moment that he let his guard off with flirting with that girl at the pool
Hmm.
is right when he dies, and he dies off
Yeah.
screen by the Mexicans, which is I feel like again that feels like a very real thing that would probably happen because
Yeah.
the Mexicans had more numbers while Javier's, and then something else like I thought was interesting about the ending was because there's really mixed reviews on the ending. Some people really like it. Some people are like, I don't. They're like, just like how you thought, like, or saying like, oh, Sheriff Bell's like the whole ending, but like he's barely in like
Yeah.
the whole like the whole second act. Was how once he figures out like, oh, he's gonna come back to the scene and I can catch him, and then you see in like the mirror and the shadows, he thinks he's right there, but he's late.
Hmm.
He misses him,
Yeah.
and then he still comes back for Llewellyn Moss's wife at the end, just like he
Yeah.
promised pretty much to Llewellyn. He was like, if you don't give it to me, I'm gonna kill your wife,
Yeah.
and then it's inferred that he does end up killing her,
Yeah.
and then he just crashes.
And she's the first person not to play his game,
Yeah,
which was interesting because directly after, it seemed like he walked through all that danger the whole movie. He took a few shotgun BBs to the leg, but that was pretty much it. Um, when it comes to damage that he took throughout the movie, and as soon as he decides not to leave it up to fate and chance, well, really, his wife does. She doesn't play that game with him, and then boom, that's the first time he really like gets seriously injured. He's got a bone sticking out of his
yeah,
arm in a freak car accident.
yeah. Yeah,
I thought that was an interesting portrayal there for his character arc.
yeah, it's such an interesting ending towards the end. It's like, all right, like he's just insanely hurt and he's just gonna walk away. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. um, yeah, I love the movie. I think it's awesome. It's probably like one of my best or my favorite like Western movies. Um,
Hmm.
just really portrays like how real I think yeah, the Coen brothers. I think it's personally my second favorite Coen brother movie. I think number one is Fargo for me. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
I'll have to put that one on my list.
yeah, Fargo. Um, and then just going up Brolin's like acting performance itself is that this is like one of his big breakout scenes. So you had Milk where he was more of a side character, and then watching an interview with him with Brolin was he didn't even expect to get it. He said he went to the interview.
I I saw that.
Yeah, he went to the interview and then he saw another actor who he didn't name laughing it up with the Coen brothers, laughing it up like he was like, "Oh, they're probably gonna get it. Let me just still do it." And then they called him like 2 hours later and be like, "Would you be interested?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, I would."
I, s- I saw even before that he was filming something with Tarantino,
Hmm.
and Tarantino sent over the audition tape to the Coen brothers for it. I thought that was interesting too. All these guys know each other and probably talk pretty regularly.
Yeah, and he said he bought a cowboy hat, rubbed it in some dirt, to make it look a little more real. And then he said he just like started calling people in random West Texas to learn their accents so he could like learn the right one. But then he went to a gas station where he was living in California and then ran into someone from West Texas, and that's the accent he actually went with.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it's just
You
a,
could tell he definitely put a lot into this role. It didn't feel like I was watching Josh Brolin. It felt like I was just, watching some guy who lived in West Texas who lived kind of off the land, lived in a trailer, just figuring stuff out on his own.
mhm. That's how I feel about every movie I've watched with him. Whereas I don't feel
Hmm.
like I'm watching an actor's performance. It's just like the person. To where
Yeah.
this would probably be like one of the bigger movies where he's like the main character, I would say, like at least one of them. While some of the other ones, he's more of a side character, or like just he's not like the guy, or he's in a more of an ensemble. I can't really think of a movie where he's just the main character and there's no like, ensemble cast to it.
I was gonna say that besides Thanos, I mean,
Yeah,
it still is an ensemble cast, but Infinity War is definitely Thanos' story.
yeah,
But besides that, and No Country for Old Men, I haven't really seen a movie where I've been like, oh, he's the guy in this, you know.
yeah. That gets right into what we're going into next, which is Thanos in the MCU. We both watch plenty of Marvel movies, both Infinity
Comic
War
books in
and
general,
Endgame.
yeah.
Yeah, and he's such a big character for like the MCU itself. Was a conclusion of like four different sagas that were ending. Um, Infinity War, and in most aspects, Thanos is the main character of Infinity War. Like it's all revolved around him. Well, Endgame,
Yep.
he's kind of just like a normal villain. Um, yeah, watching an interview with Josh Brolin, he gets into like playing Thanos and all that, where he was offered the role. He kind of played him a little bit in Guardians of the Galaxy, little cameos here and there. But then he like kept reading more and more about the character itself and like his duality of like what he seeks justice is, and like
Hmm.
was he just using it to kill people or was it actually like what he believed? And he thought that was a really interesting character.
Yeah, and Thanos is so iconic outside of Josh Brolin. Like before Infinity War, a lot of people knew who Thanos was from the comics and that kind of stuff. And I don't know what I would have thought Thanos to sound like, but Josh Brolin's voice is exactly that, and I think he does a great job at it.
Yeah, no, he is awesome in it. He talks about how he was really trying to portray like some other because motion capture people before that did really well, like the Lord of the Rings character.
I think of Andy Serkis a
Yeah,
lot when I think of motion capture.
yeah, he was like really like apparently he talked to him a lot of like how to portray like acting through motion capture because it's extremely difficult because there's you just have like a bunch of dots on you and that's but you have to act with real people in time.
Hmm.
So I think it adds to like his acting roles as well and like what he's capable of. And then some other characters that he's played. Sicario, he plays like a CIA detective in that CIA like operator.
Hmm.
Justin also hasn't seen Sicario. I
Yeah.
really recommend it to anyone out there. It's on Netflix right now. Um, oh yeah, last time we forgot to mention where the movies are available on. So Milk is available on Paramount Plus, and then No Country for Old Men is also available on Amazon Prime, right?
Yeah, I watched it on Amazon Prime, and I think it was also on. I think a lot of movies are on Apple TV, but you got to pay for them or their streaming service. But
Yeah.
this one was on Amazon Prime. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So yeah, Sicario is on Netflix. I recommend it. It's just a story about how they're trying to take down the cartel, but it turns out
Hmm.
to be a little more complicated than that. It really follows Emily Blunt's character as she's just like a normal, like FBI like worker and for like a smaller
Hmm.
city, and then she gets taken into like the crazy CIA world and like how the CIA is actually sometimes gray ethically how they work.
Okay. Yeah.
It gets really interesting into it, and then Josh Brolin's character, he's just like, again, he just brings like a very real aspect to it. And then another great director that he works with, which is Denis Villeneuve, which sets him up to
Hmm.
Dune because Denis. really just chose him because he knew him from Sicario, and he was like, yeah, he could play a pretty interesting role.
And so I haven't seen Dune. I'm pretty sure he plays Timothy Chalamet's father in that, correct?
Father, more of a father figure. So Oscar Isaac
Okay.
plays his actual father in the first one.
Okay.
He plays like a more of like a mentoring role. Um, yeah, there's like three characters in it that really play like a mentoring role. So you got he's from Aquaman, Jason Momoa. He's like the
Hmm.
trainer, so he's like training him
Okay.
how to be like a fighter. Josh Brolin's character is more of like a helper slash assistant to Oscar Isaac slash like can actually talk to Timothée Chalamet's character more, and then Oscar Isaac's like actually the father.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, that whole movie's politics is crazy. Yeah, Doom World is insane, but some other Josh Brolin characters, I think I list, but I think overall him as an actor, seeing his interesting arc. So he went from a kid actor to where a big drop off to then the 2000s having great movies. So he was also in True Grit, also with the Coen Brothers. That
Hmm.
movie was nominated for a bunch of Oscars. Um, and then No Country for Old Men. And then you got the Sicario, you got Dune, you got Weapons now. I think he's just like gradually gonna. I think he's getting pickier with his choices, but he's still looking for like a character that he can play that's just real.
Yeah, I'd like to see him in like not necessarily a villain role, but kind of like a role where he's the standout character,
Mm-hmm.
more just overall in general. I know he's been in a lot of the movies as these side characters, but just more like kind of like Moss. But even then, it was hard in No Country because he was definitely like overshadowed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't even know what character I would put him in. Just I'd like to see him be the guy in something.
Yeah, I think I'm surprised looking back that Llewellyn Moss, like him, he wasn't nominated for an Oscar for that role. Um,
He wasn't.
yeah.
Wow.
He was only the only nominations he's gotten so far is from Milk, which is interesting because he's
Okay.
actually only in like 25 minutes of that movie,
Yeah.
which actually just says how well like he portrayed like the real life person. Um,
Yeah.
but it's interesting with all his roles, the only one he's been nominated for is Milk. Um, I also think it's
Maybe we give him
Sicario.
something like that.
Yeah, I also
Put
think
him
it's
in a biopic.
yes, yeah, because biopics at that time and still are just Oscar grabs.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, he's still getting nominated like crazy. Um, but I think Weapons, the Oscar maybe not, but at least a Golden Globe. I hope he gets some
Hmm.
recognition because he's also really good in that. Him and Julia Garner really are the stars of that film, in my opinion. And the kid actor is actually insane in that movie. I was very impressed. Usually, most kid actors you can just tell it's not the best,
Yeah.
but the kid actually kills it. Um, but yeah, so the next week we are going to have more on like a topic route. So it's going to be movies revolved around beaches, um, either set on a beach or like the main point of the movie is set on a beach or the main aspect of it.
Yeah. So, what are the two movies we decided to pick for each other? Or you picked for me.
Castaway.
I forgot already.
Yeah.
Yeah, Castaway. Castaway. I haven't seen Castaway yet.
Yeah. I picked
And then,
Castaway as Top Hanks. It's pretty much about he gets on a plane crash and then he's on an island, cast away for
yeah.
a long time. It's a very popular movie.
Hmm.
And then Justin picked for me because I didn't really realize how many movies I've seen with the beaches before. But I think it's E2 Mama Tommy In. It's a Spanish movie. I don't know if it's actually all said in Spanish, and it's um, so it's going to be like having to read most of it. But I'm really interested. I've heard really good things. It's nominated a bunch for a lot of things for that year for international film and all that. Um,
Hmm.
as one of Justin's favorite actors, he's the lead actor of in Andor.
Yep.
But apparently that's just a movie about like a coming of age story about two guys right after high school going on a trip, but then they run into like an older woman who like teaches them about life.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch both of them, and hopefully somebody can enjoy our podcast on the beach
Yep.
while listening to movies about the beach.
Yes, sir. Perfect timing because summer's about to end. So it's like the last moments for a lot of people to be able to go to the beach. Um, so yeah.
All right, sweet.